Hey, did you know in the year 2030, everybody is going to be beige with green eyes and racism will finally be over? Still no hoverboards though. Today we're going to talk about that weird meme that claims interracial relationships and pretty mixed babies are the cure for racism. You may have seen this photo from National Geographic floating around the internet, suggesting that in several decades the majority of people in America will be of mixed race. There's this idea that if everyone in the future is coffee-colored and racially ambiguous, institutionalized racism in America will be a thing of the past, right? Oh, sweetie, if it were only that simple. Not all mixed-race people look racially ambiguous like Rashida Jones or Halsey. For example, President Obama is mixed race, but most people just code him as black. Not to mention that mixed people come in all different combinations, not just X-race person plus white person. Ew, that just turned into a math equation. No matter how you look at it, it's kind of icky to fetishize mixed-race people, distilling what makes them valuable down to the way they look, or more frequently, what makes them look more white. And while some people talk up mixed babies as a path to racial harmony may mean well, here are 3 reasons why multiracial people won't end racism. First, and this is a big one, being mixed does not shield you from racism. In fact, research published in 2015 by the Pew Research Institute shows that the majority of mixed-race people have faced discrimination in the form of racial slurs and jokes, poor customer service, and racial profiling by police. But we don't need studies to know that being mixed doesn't mean being immune to racism. Just take a look at this country's history. Think of the millions of mixed people who came out of the institution of slavery as a result of sexual violence. Many slave owners were still very much willing to enslave and sell off their own mixed kids. And if you need an extremely recent example, Chloe Bennet, a half-white, half-Chinese actress who stars on Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., laid down some serious truth on how being biracial doesn't exempt you from discrimination when someone on Twitter called her out for changing her last name from Huang to Bennet. She said, "Changing my last name doesn't change the fact that my blood is half Chinese, that I lived in China, speak Mandarin, or that I was culturally raised both American and Chinese. It means I had to pay my rent, and Hollywood is racist and wouldn't cast me with a last name that made them uncomfortable." Which brings us to our next point. There are actually already a lot of mixed people, and that hasn't solved racism. According to a 2015 study by the Pew Research Center, the number of mixed-race Americans is actually growing 3 times as fast as the American population as a whole, which is why some people think we're automatically headed for that racial utopia. But here's the thing, approximately 9 million people in the United States are already mixed race, and that hasn't made racism go away, nor has it made talking about race any easier. Some people think that with millions of multiracial people walking around, everyone should have a deep and nuanced understanding of race and racism. But that's like assuming having daughters will end sexism and sexual violence, or that gay children will end homophobia. Which, considering people have been having daughters and gay children since the beginning of time, babies clearly aren't the solution to structural oppression. And on top of that, having a mixed kid might not actually affect how you feel about people who aren't your kid, thanks to confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency for people to interpret and recall information in a way that confirms their pre-existing beliefs. Sometimes people see their biracial family members as existing outside of the negative cultural stereotypes they hold against minorities in general. What can happen is the mixed kid becomes an exception to the rule. They're the good kind of minority. So please, let's not turn mixed children into the new, "but I have a black friend." You don't automatically understand racism or the experiences of all people of color simply because of your friends or family. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, racism is an institutional problem. Let's pretend that more mixed race people means everybody is suddenly super nice to each other and harbors no personal biases or prejudice. Great! But being nice to each other won't solve housing inequality or the fact that white Americans still hold up to 88% of the nation's wealth despite being 64% of the population, or force the US government to honor its treaties with Native Americans. Racism is a complex problem that has existed for hundreds of years, and complex problems almost always require complex, multifaceted solutions. As we've spoken about before, during the Great Depression in the 1930s, the US government used racially motivated assessments as part of a huge mortgage refinancing initiative. The goal was to keep people of color out of certain neighborhoods, and because it was effective, it prevented huge amounts of black homeownership. And its effects are still a problem today. A 2017 study by the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago found that the practice of redlining in Chicago had a persistent adverse impact on local neighborhoods. They found redlining affected homeownership rates, home values, and credit scores in 2010. 2010! Which is 70 plus years after the problem even started. Racism isn't just about individuals, it's about institutions. reasons, and those aren't going to change just because of the racial makeup of your parents. Look, having friends and romantic partners of different races is definitely not a bad thing. I can personally vouch for that. Having mixed children is not a bad thing. It's great. After all, couples like Mildred and Richard Loving fought valiantly so people of all races have the right to love and marry whoever they want. At the end of the day, coveting mixed children because of how cute they look or because they represent some idea of racial equality that doesn't quite exist yet is super unfair to them. It fetishizes them and also erases the very complex reality of what it means to be mixed race. So if we're going to truly end racism and white supremacy, we're going to have to think of more concrete ways to fight racist laws, policies, and ideas. Unfortunately, settling down and having a bunch of cafe au lait babies is probs not going to be the nail in the racism coffin. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on Decoded.